The blizzard buried the Bozeman train station, turning the platform into a place everyone passed, but no one stopped. A former U.S. Marine waited there with his retired canine when he noticed a young woman hiding against the wall, holding a freezing golden puppy. She didn't ask for help for herself. She asked him to take the dog, because if she kept it, they would find her. He thought it was just one night, one small act of mercy.
He seems to like you.
He didn't know the dog was proof of something buried. He didn't know he was already being followed. And he didn't know that by choosing not to walk away, he was about to stand his ground for the first time since the war.
He's usually so scared of strangers, but
before we
he seems
begin,
to like you.
Tell us where you're watching from, and if this story touches your heart, please subscribe for more. Snow drove sideways across the Bozeman train station, turning the platform into a narrow strip of light swallowed by winter. The wind carried the hollow echo of metal and rails, as if the night itself were waiting. Ethan Walker stood beneath the flickering platform lamp with his shoulders squared against the cold, boots planted wide the way they had been for most of his adult life. He was 42, tall and broad-shouldered, with a frame that still carried the discipline of the U.S. Marine Corps, despite the years since discharge. His dark hair was cut short and already streaked with gray at the temples, his jaw sharp and dusted with a rough beard he no longer bothered shaving daily. A faint scar ran along his left cheekbone, barely visible unless the light caught it just right. People often mistook his silence for coldness, but it was simply caution, learned the hard way after years of listening more than speaking had kept him alive. At his side sat Rex, a retired canine German shepherd, 8 years old, sable-coated with black saddle markings and intelligent amber eyes that never stopped scanning. Rex's muzzle had begun to gray, but his posture remained alert, ears twitching at every sound. He had served 2 tours overseas with Ethan, and though the leash between them was loose, the bond was taut and unbreakable. Rex sensed tension in places long before humans named it. Yet tonight he was quiet, watchful rather than aggressive, his tail low but steady. Ethan had no particular destination that night. He was waiting for the last train east, more out of habit than necessity, killing time in a place that understood waiting. That was when he noticed her. She sat on the far end of the platform, half hidden by a concrete pillar, her back pressed into the wall as if she feared the wind might peel her away. Emily Carter looked to be in her late 20s, slim to the point of fragility, her shoulders narrow beneath an oversized, threadbare winter coat. Strands of chestnut-brown hair slipped loose from beneath a wool hat, clinging to her pale cheeks damp with melting snow. Her skin was fair, almost translucent in the station light, marked by faint shadows beneath tired eyes that had learned to stay alert even when her body begged for rest. She wasn't crying. That, more than anything, caught Ethan's attention. In her arms, wrapped tightly against her chest, was a golden retriever puppy, no more than 5 or 6 months old. The dog's fur was a soft, honey gold, dulled by wet snow and grime, its ears too large for its head in that awkward, growing way. The puppy trembled violently, ribs moving too fast beneath thin flesh, nose tucked into Emily's scarf as if trying to disappear. One small paw twitched now and then, a sign of cold edging toward something worse. Rex shifted beside Ethan, not growling, not barking, just leaning forward slightly, eyes fixed on the pair. Ethan felt the familiar tightening in his chest, the one that came before decisions he never planned to make. Emily noticed him watching and stiffened. For a moment, her gaze flicked to Rex, then back to Ethan's face, measuring, weighing. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet, hoarse from cold and disuse. "Sir," she said, standing slowly, careful not to jostle the puppy. She was a little shorter than Ethan, her posture guarded but dignified, like someone used to bracing for rejection. "I'm not asking for money." Ethan said nothing, his eyes dropping briefly to the puppy, then back to her face. Emily swallowed, tightening her hold as the puppy shivered harder. I was wondering if you could hold him for me, just for the night. He's too cold. I can come back in the morning. The words landed heavier than any plea for cash ever could. Ethan felt something shift behind his ribs, an old memory stirring, of nights spent on watch, of promises made quietly to men who never made it home. Rex stood now, stepping closer, placing himself subtly between Ethan and the open platform, not threatening, just present. "Why can't you keep him?" Ethan asked, his voice low, even. Emily's eyes dropped. "Because if I do, they'll find me," she said simply. "And he won't last another night like this." The honesty in her tone unsettled him. No rehearsed story, no practiced tears. Just a fact laid bare. Ethan glanced at the puppy again and crouched, resting on the balls of his feet. He reached out slowly, letting the dog sniff his glove. The puppy lifted its head weakly, tail giving a single uncertain wag before another tremor ran through its body. Ethan could feel the cold radiating off its small frame. Rex sat beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched, his eyes never leaving Emily's face. "You don't have to give him to me," Ethan said at last. "But you can't stay out here." Emily hesitated, then nodded once, relief and fear tangled together. Ethan gestured toward the station doors. "There's a waiting room." "It's warmer. Let's get out of the wind." Inside, the air was stale, but still. Ethan shrugged out of his heavy coat and draped it over the puppy without a word. Emily's breath hitched just once before she looked away, embarrassed by gratitude. As they sat, Ethan's instincts refused to settle. Through the glass doors beyond the snow, he caught sight of a pickup truck idling near the far end of the lot, its headlights off, engine humming low. He had noticed it earlier, then again when he arrived. Now, hours later, it was still there. Ethan's jaw tightened. Some things, he had learned, were never coincidence. The waiting room smelled faintly of old coffee and disinfectant, a place designed to keep people moving rather than staying. Ethan Walker sat with his back to the wall, knees angled outward, a habit left over from years of choosing corners and cover. Rex lay at his boots, head up, eyes following every shift of light across the glass doors. Across from them, Emily Carter perched on the edge of a plastic chair, shoulders curled inward as if she were trying to take up less space in the world. The golden puppy bundled in Ethan's coat against her chest. In the steadier light, Ethan could see her more clearly. Emily was thinner than she first appeared. Tall, but narrow-hipped, with hands that trembled not only from cold, but from a deeper exhaustion. Her fingers were chapped and red, nails cut short, the marks of someone who had learned to survive without ornament. When she finally lifted her gaze to speak, her eyes were a soft hazel, watchful and guarded, the kind that had learned to read rooms quickly and trust slowly. She carried herself with a quiet resolve, but the way her jaw tightened when she paused suggested fear held carefully in check. "I don't usually talk to strangers," she said after a long silence, her voice low so it wouldn't carry. "But you didn't look like someone who asks questions just to use the answers." Ethan didn't reply right away. He reached down to adjust the coat around the puppy, checking its ears and paws the way he'd been taught in a different life, making sure warmth was returning. "You don't owe me anything," he said. "Just trying to keep you both from freezing." Emily nodded, swallowing. "I'm running," she admitted. From people who smile when they shouldn't, places that call themselves help but lock doors at night. She hesitated, then added, "He's the only thing I didn't leave behind." The puppy stirred at her words, lifting its head with a soft whine before settling again, the golden fur along its spine slowly losing that brittle, frozen stiffness. Before Ethan could respond, the waiting room door opened and a man stepped inside, shaking snow from his cap. He was a railroad police officer, mid-50s, with a weathered face lined by years of cold wind and long shifts. His name tag read Officer Mark Benson, and he moved with the weary efficiency of someone who'd seen too many winters. He was of average height, stocky, his gray mustache neatly trimmed, eyes sharp but not unkind. Benson scanned the room, gaze landing on Ethan, then drifting to Emily and the puppy. "Evening," Benson said, voice practiced. "Tickets, folks. Last call's coming through." Emily's body reacted before her mind caught up. She stiffened, clutching the puppy tighter, breath coming faster. Ethan noticed immediately. He rose smoothly, placing himself just half a step forward, not blocking the officer but shifting the focus. "Mine's digital," Ethan said calmly. "Signal's spotty in here, but I can pull it up." Benson nodded, glancing at Rex with a brief, appreciative look. "Retired K-9?" he asked. "Yes, sir," Ethan replied. "Marine Corps." That earned a pause, then a small nod of respect. While Ethan brought up the ticket, Benson glanced back at Emily. "Ma'am, you traveling tonight?" Emily opened her mouth, then closed it again, panic flashing across her face. The words tangled somewhere in her throat. Ethan spoke before the silence could deepen. "She's with me," he said evenly. "Weather caught us off guard." Benson studied them both for a beat longer, weighing. Then he tipped his cap. "Storm's nasty. Best not linger. Train'll be delayed anyway." He turned and left as quietly as he'd entered. Emily exhaled shakily once the door closed, shoulders sagging. "I'm sorry," she whispered.
"I didn't mean to cause trouble."
"You didn't," Ethan said. He watched the puppy's breathing, slower now, steadier. "But we're not staying here." Outside, the wind howled louder, rattling the windows. Ethan glanced through the glass and felt that familiar prickle along his spine. The pickup truck was still there, farther down the lot, lights off, its dark shape half buried in snow. When he stood, Rex rose with him, muscles taut. "I have a place," Ethan said, voice firm. "Not fancy, warm enough. You can rest. Both of you." Emily hesitated, instinct battling desperation. "If they see me with you, they won't," Ethan said. "And if they do, that's my problem." They moved quickly, heads down against the wind as they crossed the lot. Ethan unlocked his old sedan and ushered Emily into the passenger seat, Rex hopping into the back without command. As Ethan started the engine, he checked the mirror. The pickup's engine turned over, headlights blinking on a second too late to be accidental. Ethan pulled away smoothly, not rushing. In the mirror, the truck eased forward behind them, keeping its distance. Rex let out a low, steady growl, eyes fixed on the rear window. Ethan's grip tightened on the wheel. He had learned long ago that some people didn't walk away when winter gave them cover. Tonight, neither would he. The apartment was quiet in the way only old buildings could be, the kind of silence that settled into the walls after decades of watching people come and go. Ethan's place sat on the second floor of a brick walk-up a few blocks from the station, small but solid, with windows that rattled when the wind pressed too hard. He ushered Emily inside first, setting his keys down with deliberate calm, then knelt immediately by the golden puppy, whose shivering had eased but not stopped. Under the warm kitchen light, the puppy looked even younger. Its fur was still that soft, uneven gold of early growth, thick at the neck but thin along the belly, where ribs could be counted if one looked too closely. Ethan filled a bowl with lukewarm water and another with a bit of canned food he kept for Rex, mixing it gently so it wouldn't shock the puppy's system. He checked the dog's gums, pressed 2 fingers lightly against its chest, counted the rise and fall. Years ago, in a desert half a world away, he'd learned how quickly a body could fail when cold and fear teamed up. Tonight, he refused to let that lesson repeat. Rex took his post without being told. The German Shepherd lay directly in front of the apartment door, broad back to the room, head lifted, ears angled forward. Even resting, he was vigilant, the habit etched into his bones by 8 years of service. His amber eyes flicked briefly to Ethan, then to Emily, and finally back to the door, as if cataloging who mattered and where the danger would come from. Emily stood awkwardly near the counter, hands folded together, watching Ethan work. In the warmth, color slowly returned to her face, revealing freckles across the bridge of her nose and the faint line of a healed cut near her hairline. She pushed her coat off her shoulders, revealing a thin sweater stretched over narrow arms. She looked exhausted in a way that went beyond sleep deprivation, like someone who'd been braced for impact for too long. "You don't have to do all that," she said, softly, though her eyes never left the puppy. Ethan shrugged. "He needs it." He slid the bowl closer. The puppy sniffed, hesitated, then began to eat, tail thumping weakly against the floor. The sound drew a breath out of Emily she hadn't realized she was holding. They sat in silence for a while, the only noise the wind outside and the soft clink of the spoon against the bowl. Eventually Emily spoke again, her voice steadier now. "I stayed in a place once," she said. "They called it a shelter, said it was for girls who needed help." She paused, jaw tightening. "They kept our IDs, told us it was for safety. If you broke rules, you didn't get meals. Or sleep." Ethan listened without interrupting, leaning back against the counter, arms crossed loosely. He'd learned that silence often did more than questions ever could. "I left when I could," Emily continued. "The family that owned him, they helped me." She nodded toward the puppy, who was licking the last of the food from the bowl. "They took me in, gave me work, a room. Then one night they were just gone. House empty. No note. No calls returned." Her voice wavered for the first time. "He was all that was left." Ethan's gaze drifted to the dog, then to Rex, whose ears flicked at the change in her tone. "So he's not what they're after," Ethan said slowly. "He's what proves something happened." Emily looked at him, startled. Then she nodded. "If I lose him, I lose everything I can point to." Outside, a car passed, tires hissing on slush. Rex's head lifted a fraction higher. Ethan felt the hairs at the back of his neck rise, an old reflex that never truly went away. He moved to the window and pulled the curtain back just enough to look out. Snow drifted lazily under the streetlights, painting the world in gray and white. Nothing moved. "Stay here," he said quietly, though Emily hadn't moved anyway. He checked the locks, once, then again, more for his own reassurance than necessity. When he returned to the room, Emily had settled on the couch, the puppy curled against her side, already half asleep, breath even now. She watched Rex, who had shifted slightly but remained between them and the door. "He trusts you," she said, nodding toward the shepherd. "He trusts the work," Ethan replied. "So do I." Hours passed. The storm outside thickened, wind scraping along the brick like fingers searching for a way in. Ethan brewed coffee he didn't intend to drink, pacing once, then stopping, forcing himself to sit. He had learned that panic fed on motion. Near midnight, a sound drifted through the window, a low engine idling, somewhere too long to be coincidence. Ethan stood slowly, careful not to wake Emily or the puppy, and moved back to the curtain. 3 blocks down, half hidden behind a row of parked cars, sat the pickup, lights off, engine running, waiting. Rex rose silently, coming to stand at Ethan's side, shoulder brushing his leg. Ethan let the curtain fall back into place. He didn't wake Emily. Not yet. The longest nights, he knew, were never about what you did in the dark, but what you prepared for before morning came. Morning came without light. The sky over Bozeman remained a dull sheet of gray, heavy with snow that threatened to fall again at any moment. Ethan Walker did not sleep. He sat at the small kitchen table with his jacket on, coffee untouched, listening to the building breathe. When he was certain the pickup down the street had finally gone quiet, he woke Emily with a gentle knock on the couch arm, careful not to startle the golden puppy curled against her ribs.
"We're moving," he said softly. "Just for today."
Emily nodded without argument. Her face was pale but composed, the way it had been the night before, fear present but disciplined. She pulled on her coat, tucking loose strands of brown hair behind her ears, and gathered the puppy close. Rex was already standing, tail low, posture alert, sensing the shift in intent. They drove across town in silence, avoiding main roads. Ethan kept his speed steady, never rushing, never lingering. The church sat at the edge of an older neighborhood, half hidden by leafless cottonwoods and snow-choked hedges. It was a modest wooden building, white paint peeling, the steeple slightly crooked as if bowing under the weight of too many winters. Father Thomas Hale was waiting for them. He was in his late 70s, tall but stooped, with a thin frame wrapped in a wool coat that had seen decades of service. His hair was a soft silver, combed neatly back, his skin weathered and ruddy from years of tending the grounds himself. His eyes, a clear, faded blue, carried a calm that came from listening more than speaking. When he smiled, it was slow and deliberate, the smile of a man who had seen suffering and never turned away from it. "Ethan," Father Hale said, voice warm and gravelly. "You look tired." "I am," Ethan replied. "I need a favor." Father Hale's gaze moved to Emily, then to the puppy in her arms, and finally to Rex, who stood between Ethan and the open yard, scanning the tree line. "Come inside," the priest said. "Cold like this makes people say things they don't mean." The church smelled of old wood and candle wax. Inside, it was dim but peaceful, the kind of quiet that pressed gently rather than closing in. Father Hale led them to a small office near the back, lit by a single lamp. He brought blankets for the puppy and a bowl of water, setting them down without asking questions. Emily sat on the edge of a chair, shoulders tight, eyes darting to the windows. Under the lamplight, her exhaustion showed more clearly. The faint hollows beneath her cheekbones, the way her hands clenched and unclenched in her lap. When Father Hale offered tea, she declined politely, but Ethan noticed her fingers shake. "We won't stay long," Ethan said. "I just need somewhere quiet, somewhere safe." Father Hale studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Safe is a word people use carefully," he said, "but you're welcome here." As the minutes passed, Emily began to talk again, slowly at first, then with more clarity. Ethan asked only what mattered: names, places, times, letting her memory guide the pace. She spoke of the family who had taken her in, of the work she did, of the sudden emptiness when she returned one evening to find the house abandoned. Utilities cut, phones disconnected. No trace but the golden puppy waiting by the door, whimpering. "They weren't perfect," she said quietly. "But they were kind, and they were scared near the end." She looked down at the dog, now sleeping soundly in the blankets, its chest rising and falling in steady rhythm. "If he disappears, it's like they never existed." Ethan felt the weight of her words settle into him. He had seen evidence erased before. People reduced to silence because proof was inconvenient. Rex shifted, a low sound rumbling in his chest, not a growl, but a warning. Ethan looked up just in time to see movement beyond the frosted window. Two figures stood across the street near a parked sedan, faces obscured by hats and distance. They weren't approaching. They were watching. Ethan's jaw tightened. He stepped closer to the window, careful not to be seen, memorizing their posture. Relaxed, unhurried. Hunters, not thieves. "They're still here," Emily whispered, following his gaze. "Yes," Ethan said, "but they're not here for you." She turned sharply. "What do you mean?" Ethan glanced at the puppy, then back at her. If they wanted you, they'd have tried already. You're visible, vulnerable. He exhaled slowly. They're waiting for a mistake. For him. The realization drained the color from Emily's face. Her arms tightened around the Golden, instinctive, protective. "So I'm bait," she said. "No," Ethan replied firmly. "You're a witness, and he's the truth they can't erase." Rex moved closer to Emily's chair, placing his body between her and the window, his presence solid and reassuring. Father Hale watched the exchange in silence, hands folded, eyes thoughtful. "You can stay here as long as you need," the priest said at last. "But hiding is a heavy burden. It wears people down." Ethan nodded. He knew that better than most. Protection was never just about strength. It was about endurance, about choosing to stand when walking away would be easier. As they prepared to leave, Ethan took one last look outside. The two figures were gone, but the sense of being watched remained, lingering like cold in the bones. The weight settled fully then. Whoever was following them didn't care about Emily's fear or her past. They wanted the Golden puppy, and Ethan understood now that keeping it safe meant standing in front of something far larger than a winter storm. Snow had hardened overnight, turning the ground along the rail spur into a slick, white crust that cracked underfoot. Ethan Walker parked near the service road that paralleled the tracks, engine idling low, lights off. The church was behind them now, its crooked steeple swallowed by distance. But the sense of being watched had followed them like a shadow that refused to detach. Emily stepped out last, pulling the hood of her coat tight around her face. In the gray morning light, she looked steadier than she had the night before. Still thin, still wary, but with a set to her shoulders that suggested something had shifted. The Golden puppy was bundled against her chest, eyes open now, curious despite the cold, its soft ears flicking at the metallic groan of rails cooling in the distance. Rex moved first, placing himself slightly ahead of Ethan, nose low, tail stiff, reading the air. They hadn't taken more than a dozen steps when a voice cut through the quiet. "That's far enough." Two men emerged from behind a freight container, boots crunching on snow. The taller one stepped forward, mid-30s, lean and sharp-featured, with a narrow beard trimmed close to his jaw. He wore a dark parka unzipped at the collar, gloves tucked into his pockets, posture loose with practiced confidence. His eyes were pale and calculating, the kind that measured risk the way accountants measured numbers. The second man was broader, heavier through the shoulders, with a shaved head and a thick neck disappearing into his coat. He said nothing, just watched, hands visible, stance wide. Ethan shifted subtly, angling his body between Emily and the men. "This isn't your property," he said evenly. "Keep walking." The bearded man smiled without warmth. "We're not here for trouble," he said. "Just the dog." Emily's breath hitched. Her arms tightened instinctively around the Golden, who whimpered softly, sensing the tension. Rex growled then, a low, rolling sound that vibrated through his chest, teeth bared just enough to be unmistakable. "You don't get to ask for him," Ethan replied. His voice remained calm, but something harder edged beneath it, something forged long before this winter. "You don't get near her." The broader man shifted his weight, boots grinding into ice. "You're making this complicated." Ethan didn't move. "No," he said. "You are." The bearded man's gaze flicked to Rex, then back to Ethan's face, lingering on the scar along his cheek, the way he stood without fidgeting, without flinch. Recognition sparked there, brief but telling. "You military?" he asked, tone casual. Ethan didn't answer. That was enough. The bearded man nodded once to his partner. The broader man took a step closer, and in that instant, Rex lunged. The shepherd moved like coiled steel released, a blur of muscle and fur. He planted himself squarely in front of Emily, snapping once in warning, forcing the man to stumble back. The bearded man swore, reaching for something beneath his coat. Ethan moved at the same time, stepping forward, arm outstretched, voice sharp now. "Stop." The broader man kicked out, catching Rex along the shoulder. The impact sent the dog skidding across the ice with a yelp, momentum broken but not spirit. Rex scrambled back to his feet immediately, limping slightly, eyes never leaving the men. Emily cried out, then did something Ethan hadn't expected. She didn't run. She stepped forward until her shoulder brushed Ethan's arm, lifting her chin, the golden pressed tight against her chest. Her hands were shaking, but she held her ground. "Don't touch him," she said, voice thin but unbroken. "You won't take him." Ethan felt the weight of that moment settle, heavy and undeniable. He planted his boots wider, shoulders squared, the old stance returning as naturally as breath. "You want the dog," he said, eyes locked on the bearded man. "You go through me." For a second, the world seemed to pause. Snow drifted lazily between them. The bearded man studied Ethan more carefully now, gaze sharp, reassessing. "Marine," he said at last, not a question. "I can tell by the way you don't blink." Ethan didn't deny it. The bearded man's smile faded. He took a step back, lifting his hands slightly, palms open. "This isn't worth it," he muttered to his partner. "Not today." They retreated slowly, never turning their backs, until the freight container swallowed them again. Silence returned, broken only by Rex's labored breathing. Ethan knelt immediately beside the dog, hands gentle but efficient as he checked the shepherd's shoulder. It was already swelling, but nothing felt broken. Rex leaned into his touch, tail giving a weak thump against the snow. Emily sank down beside them, tears finally spilling free. She pressed her forehead briefly to the Golden's head, whispering something only the dog could hear. Ethan stood and looked down the tracks, heart still pounding, understanding settling in with chilling clarity. They hadn't come to scare her. They'd come to test him, and now they knew exactly who stood in their way. The cabin sat beyond the city limits, tucked into a stand of bare aspens where the road thinned into packed snow and quiet took on weight. Ethan Walker slowed the car as they turned in, tires crunching softly. He hadn't planned to come back here, not like this. The place had been meant for sale, a chapter he'd decided to close once and for all. Yet as the engine cut and the wind breathed through the trees, the cabin looked less like an ending and more like a pause that had been waiting. Emily stepped out carefully, boots sinking an inch into the snow. The golden puppy peeked from her coat, nose twitching, eyes bright despite the cold. Rex hopped down last, limping only slightly now, but he stayed close to Golden, body angled protectively, as if the world might still reach for it. Emily took in the cabin with a mixture of awe and apprehension. It was modest, weathered cedar siding, a porch light dim but warm, smoke staining the chimney where fires had burned through many winters. To her it looked impossibly solid. "I can't," she began, then stopped, pressing her lips together. She was tall and slender, shoulders narrow beneath her coat, hair pulled back in a loose tie that let strands brush her cheeks. Her skin had regained color, but the habit of apology still hovered at the edges of her words. "I don't have anything to offer," she said instead. "I don't want to be a burden." Ethan unlocked the door and pushed it open, the scent of old wood and cold air spilling out. He was quiet for a moment, as if choosing the right words mattered more here. Inside, the cabin was spare but cared for. Clean counters, a sofa facing a stone fireplace, a narrow table scarred by use rather than neglect. "Family isn't something you pay for," he said at last, setting his keys down. "It's something you choose." Emily blinked, then looked away, blinking again. The Golden wriggled free and toddled across the floor, slipping once, then recovering with a clumsy wag. Rex followed immediately, settling beside the puppy with a low sigh, chin resting near its flank. He licked the Golden's ear once, gently, and stayed there, a living barrier and a promise. They built the fire together. Ethan moved with practiced efficiency, stacking logs, coaxing flame. Emily held the puppy near the hearth, hands warming, breath slowing as the room filled with light. Outside, the wind rose, sweeping the treetops and carrying snow like handfuls of salt thrown hard. The storm returned with purpose, and the cabin creaked as if acknowledging an old acquaintance. Night deepened. Ethan checked the windows, the locks, the sight lines beyond the porch. He didn't mention the pickup, didn't speak the fear aloud. He brewed coffee he wouldn't drink and paced until he forced himself still. Protection, he knew, wasn't noise or bravado. It was patience. It was staying awake when sleep begged. Emily sat at the table, fingers wrapped around a mug she'd barely touched. She watched Ethan in fragments, the set of his jaw, the way his eyes tracked shadows beyond the glass, the stiffness in his shoulders that suggested pain long since learned rather than healed. "You don't have to do this," she said quietly. "You've already done enough." Ethan stopped by the window, reflection overlaying the dark outside. His beard caught the firelight, making the lines around his mouth deeper, the scar on his cheekbone pale. "I told you," he said. "I'm not leaving." The storm pressed closer. Snow rattled the door. Somewhere, a branch cracked under weight. Ethan took the chair by the window, rifle within reach, not brandished, just present. Rex lifted his head, alert but calm, and shifted so his body touched the Golden's side. The puppy slept, paws twitching in a dream. Hours later, when the wind finally eased enough to hear one's own breathing again, Emily spoke into the quiet. "When I was younger," she said, "people told me home was something you earned by being useful. Quiet. Easy." She swallowed. "I was very good at being easy." Ethan didn't look at her right away. "In the Marines," he said, voice low, "we were taught to move fast, to finish the mission. Sometimes that meant choosing the objective over the people." He exhaled, a sound halfway between breath and confession. "There was a family once. Wrong place, wrong time. We were told to hold position." His hands tightened on the chair. "I followed the order. By morning, it was too late." Emily felt the weight of it settle between them, heavy and unmistakable. "I'm sorry," she said, not as a reflex, but as an offering. Ethan turned then, eyes steady but raw. "I promised myself I wouldn't let that happen again," he said. "Not if I could stand in front of it, not if I could choose differently." He glanced toward Rex and the Golden, then back to her. "This is me choosing." The fire popped softly. Outside, the storm drifted away, leaving the cabin wrapped in a quiet so complete it felt earned. Emily nodded once, tears finally finding their way down without shame. She rose and moved to the hearth, sitting close to the dogs. Rex did not move away. He shifted to make room. The Golden slept on, safe and warm, breathing easy. Ethan took his place by the window again, watching the dark without fear, knowing that whatever came next, he would not turn away. The storm did not end all at once. It loosened its grip slowly, releasing the world inch by inch, until the road to town reappeared and the snow along the fence lines settled into clean, quiet drifts. Ethan Walker drove with both hands steady on the wheel, Rex in the back seat with his head resting against the window, eyes half closed, and the Golden puppy curled into a warm, growing weight between Emily's boots. The cabin faded behind them, not abandoned, just waiting. They met with people who knew how to listen. The first was Martha Keene, a county social worker in her early 50s, tall and spare, with iron-gray hair pulled into a practical knot and skin weathered by Montana winters. Her eyes were sharp but kind, the sort that noticed trembling hands and long pauses without pushing. She spoke softly, asked questions carefully, and took notes without judgment. Emily sat across from her at a small office table, shoulders squared, voice steady despite the memories she had to walk through again. She spoke of the shelter that kept doors locked, of the family who had helped her, of the night she returned to an empty house and found only the Golden waiting, its collar still fastened, its tag scratched and worn. Ethan placed the collar on the table. It was leather, cracked with age, stamped with a name and a phone number that no longer connected. Inside the lining, Martha found what Ethan had suspected: folded papers sealed against moisture, copies of utility bills, handwritten notes, a receipt bearing a signature that matched the family Emily described. Nothing dramatic, nothing explosive. Just the stubborn kind of truth that refused to disappear. "That's enough to start," Martha said, meeting Emily's gaze. "You did the right thing." The process moved forward without spectacle. No sirens, no confrontations in the snow. Interviews followed. Records were cross-checked. Doors opened that had been closed for too long. The people who had been watching from a distance stopped watching when they realized the story would be told whether they wanted it to be or not. Justice arrived the way winter sun did in Montana, slow, pale, and undeniable. Months passed. The cabin remained a refuge, its porch light a steady beacon against the short days. Rex retired completely, the last of his working gear tucked away in a drawer. His limp faded to a memory, replaced by long afternoons near the fire and short, satisfied patrols of the yard. He grew softer around the muzzle, calmer in his movements, content in a way Ethan had never seen him before. The Golden grew fast, legs lengthening, chest filling out, fur deepening into a rich, warm gold. He learned the boundaries of the yard, the rules of the house, the comfort of routine. He slept with his head on Rex's paws and woke each morning convinced the world was good. Emily found work at a small hardware store in town. The owner, Caleb Monroe, was a broad-shouldered man in his 60s, with a gruff voice and a gentle patience, his beard white and neatly trimmed, hands nicked by decades of honest labor. He gave Emily hours that fit her strength and listened when she spoke. Over time, she stopped flinching when the bell over the door rang. Ethan returned to habits he had forgotten how to keep. He fixed a loose stair, cleared brush, cooked meals that lasted more than one sitting. Some nights he still woke before dawn, the old vigilance humming in his bones. But the house answered him now, with warmth, with breathing, with life. Winter lingered, as it always did, but inside the cabin something had changed. Laughter arrived quietly, then stayed. Emily learned to sit without apologizing. Ethan learned to stay without standing guard. They did not speak of saving or being saved. They spoke of weather and work and what to plant when spring came. One evening, as snow dusted the windows again, Emily set the Golden's collar on the mantel, not as evidence this time, but as a marker of where they had been. Ethan watched her do it and understood the difference. No one had been rescued alone. That was the truth they carried forward. They had stood together, endured together, and chosen one another when walking away would have been easier. In the end, they did not call it survival. They called it family. Sometimes the miracle doesn't arrive with thunder or fire. Sometimes it comes quietly, disguised as a choice, to stop, to listen, to protect. God does not always remove the storm. Often he sends someone willing to stand in it. In a frozen night, a frightened woman, 2 loyal dogs, and a weary man crossed paths not by accident, but by grace. What they found was not just safety, but family. In our daily lives, we pass broken places every day. A kind word, a brave heart, a moment of compassion. These are the small miracles God works through us. If this story touched you, share it with someone who needs hope. Leave a comment and tell us where you're watching from. Subscribe to the channel to walk with us through more stories of faith and healing. May God bless you, protect your home, and warm your heart wherever you are. Amen.